Welcome to The Midpoint, conversations with the extraordinary people building the American innovation economy from the inside out. I'm Patrick McKenna, founder of One America Works. Welcome to The Midpoint. I'm Patrick McKenna, founder of One America Works. Today, I'm joined by Mike Taylor, founder and chief product officer of Duality Robotics. And this is just an absolute great pleasure to get to spend some time with you. I've been looking forward to this conversation. I love robotics. I love Pittsburgh. I love what you're doing. So welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure. Nice to chat with you again.
Last time I was in Pittsburgh, we sat on a panel. We were talking about talent and we were talking about funding. And we were talking about trends, and it was super dynamic. You had a lot of opinions about the industry and startups. We have a short amount of time. We have a lot of places we could go. I think it would be good to start with just like what are you working on? Just to set the table for those who are kind of tuning in for the first time.
Sure. I'll try to keep it brief and keep too many opinions out of it. But Duality is building a digital twin integration platform so that our customers can build, train, certify AI and robotic systems. And that really comes from our founding DNA. So my co-founder, Apurva, comes from the entertainment industry. So he's part of Pixar, the technical brain trust over there. I come from field robotics, 15 years at CAT, making really, really big field robots. And the quick summary is we're trying to take Apurva's tools to solve the problems of my industry. And what we've really realized is that there's this dirty word out there called the metaverse that we've been blogging about for a while. It is completely misunderstood. So it's not what's happening at Facebook and that weirdness. The metaverse is really just at its definition. It's the virtualization of a 3D space and then all of the assets and interactions that happen inside of there. And in our view, a metaverse that can be used for enterprise to solve business needs is one that's built on simulation. It's not built for interactions. It's not involving avatars. It's simulating digital twins. And that is what we're putting together for our customers.
That's such a fantastic example of a use case for something that everybody's heard of, right? So everybody heard metaverse and say, how would it ever fit in for me? Can you give an example of who a customer or a target customer or use case for the tool?
I think the one that we can talk publicly about would be our DARPA program. So we're part of the DARPA Racer effort. So we're a prime to DARPA, very proud to be able to say that, on the Racer Sim program. And the idea there is DARPA wants to invest to help our industry figure out how to make off-road field robotics better. Because for them, if they're talking about supporting soldiers, you can't jump onto a robot and retune the parameters when you move from a grassy field to the forest. The level of resiliency that they need is higher than, a grad student project in the lab might have. And there is an entire development stream in this first phase, Racer Sim, that's focused on, well, how do we build the simulation tools to support the teams that are building the robots?
It's an amazing application. I think everybody can relate to why you need to do this in this environment. Right. And the cost savings and all the things that would come along with it. I would love to start off with kind of reset a little bit to say, like, how did you and your co-founder Apurva, how did you guys meet? How did this network come together?
There's a long story. I'll save everybody the long version, but in summary, we actually founded Duality with 3 people. So it was Apurva, myself, and Jason. And I knew Jason from years ago when I moved out here to Pittsburgh. And we were talking about, doing something together. And we were talking about, well, let's do this and this. And I was like, I'm just going to write a simulator to be able to talk to people about what we want to build. And he's like, well, I know a guy. And that's how I met Apurva. And we're like, there's something here. There's a lot of tools out there. And, I had to chop parts of my team to go build simulators in the past, and it's outrageously inefficient. So it's like, well, if there's better stuff out there and it's already ready to go, how do we get it into people's hands? And the idea of making products that are safer really resonated with Apurva as well, because he lives out in the Bay. I live here. We're both sitting here at this time where, like, a lot of my former teammates are at their autonomous car companies, and these cars are running around our streets.
Yeah.
it's front of mind for everybody back in 2018 about like these things need to be safe. And so we wanted to, again, try to make that process of making better, more resilient, safer AI and robotic systems possible. And that's kind of where all this started from.
And so it's an interesting collaboration. So you're in Pittsburgh, which I have heard is the capital of the robotics industry, maybe even globally. This has been said, and I would definitely want to unpack that a little bit, because when I last looked at the list of robotics companies, there were over 100 robotics companies in Pittsburgh. It's kind
I've
of
lost
amazing.
track, to be honest with you.
It's right. So I say it's over. Last count, I think it was 120 that I saw, which is amazing. Well, how did you get to Pittsburgh? So you didn't go to CMU or University of Pittsburgh, I don't think.
Later, so I started at CAT. I ran off to do grad school because I didn't learn enough. I got the call, hey, you should come back, but we want you to move to Pittsburgh because we want you to be the CAT person at the Carnegie Mellon team that's going to go for the urban challenge. So DARPA put together 3 grand challenges to try to move autonomous vehicles forward. So Caterpillar sponsored all 3 of them. I was in the basement of one building digging out lasers for Red Whitaker out at CMU. Race 2, a good buddy of mine was out here and he brought me out for a weekend to help with their system. So when race 3 shows up, I jumped at the chance. So I moved out here, and eventually Caterpillar formed an office, and they couldn't get me out of town. It's too wonderful. Right.
So this is so interesting. Like, a lot of people don't know, don't appreciate, don't understand, like, when you say it's so wonderful for the field that you're in, like, what's going on in Pittsburgh around robotics that brought you there and has got you committed to stay?
Honestly, it was the high bay in the FRC, but more generally, CMU, especially at that time, was unquestionably the place to be if you were interested in field robotics. Field robotics being, in my opinion, the interesting one, where robots are out in the real world doing fun things. Yeah. This is where all the great research was happening. This is where all of the great robots were really coming out of. There's wonderful work happening elsewhere. MIT and Stanford, lots of folks there, fantastic work. But in terms of, a center of gravity, it was here. And when I walked into that high bay, and I'm like, oh, more robots. This is where I should have chosen to do grad school. So that's why I started taking grad classes later on.
Got it.
But this is where all the best stuff was happening. And yeah, again, they couldn't pull me out of here.
So there was already like an installed critical mass of people working on the things that you wanted to. So the experts in the field were already there, and you were able to plug into that network and learn from them and also contribute at this highest level.
Absolutely. And it's a wonderful open community. You'll just show up at a talk on campus, or you'll go walking through a restaurant, like, oh, I know A, B, C, and D here, and everybody's friendly. It's a fantastically welcoming crew.
So why don't you, if you could just share with us what the fundraising process was like, because I feel like you guys have been pretty successful.
From the outside, I'm sure it kind of looks like that. And I know that from a statistics point, we actually definitely have. But raising seed is often a challenge. I think for anybody else that's watching this, that's trying to start a business, they're in the middle of doing it, please do understand the stories you hear about somebody walking into, Sand Hill Road and just getting money thrown at them. Those are nearly apocryphal. Sometimes people have a pretty easy job raising money, but it's exceedingly rare. Most people have to pound pavement for a really long time. When we raised seed, that was the hardest one for us. Mm-hmm. We talked with over 100 firms. And this was part of what, we were told to expect and prepare for at our accelerator. And that's exactly what we did. And we were able to put it together, but not without a ton of work. And a lot of it was focused out in the Bay. But there was a lot of conversations we had here, conversations in New York. But the fact that, at the time we had a 3-person team. And so Jason and Purva were both out there, and Purva's still there. So when it came time to raise A, we were in a much better position. Right. We had customers, we had a track record, we had a lot of fantastic things going on. So A was a whole lot easier, but it still required dozens and dozens of conversations. And if you haven't been in this space, that sounds absurd. But once you've been here, you realize that's just, table stakes for, again, 95% of us that have to make this happen. It takes a significant amount of time. You need to budget for it, and resources. You need to prepare for, if you've got a team, a part of your team disappearing essentially to get fundraising done.
Now, and how did being in Pittsburgh, I know you're split between the Bay, Silicon Valley and Pittsburgh. How did Pittsburgh benefit or hinder your ability to raise capital?
It actually helped us a ton with our A. So our lead is in Columbus and deeply appreciates the fact that we're here in Pittsburgh. From a seed perspective, there's actually a benefit to being able to tell the story that we're geographically distributed, because we do have a slight benefit from cost basis differences. It is a little bit cheaper to hire engineers in Pittsburgh than the Bay. Yeah. Shockingly, not a ton, but a little bit cheaper. We do now have a subsidiary in India, which lets us have an averaged out personnel cost that's markedly cheaper than it would be. But being able to tell that story from the very beginning, that we have the ability to pull resources from different areas, that we're not going to have these same kind of burns that other companies are going to have, is always a nice thing to be able to tell a potential investor.
You've also been able to show that how much progress you've made on less capital, right? By the Series A, you're able to show that productivity lift to say, with this amount of capital, we were able to get this far. So,
yeah,
you can do the math, the amount of capital raised, we're going to be able to go even further. That sounds like one of the stories you told, right?
And, we started before COVID, but we are very much a COVID baby in a sense. Like, I'm talking to you from my home office because we have a Pittsburgh office, but we are, generally speaking, a distributed team. And that's, just one of the things that we do to keep costs down. We don't have to have, a fancy office with, floor to ceiling glass and all that stuff.
So you mentioned being a COVID baby company, and I'm actually seeing a lot of companies that had to innovate in that environment, which is really exciting. Can you talk, was there a breakthrough moment? Now, you started in 2018, then by the time you get going, but was there a moment where you're like, oh, we're onto something, like that breakthrough where you said, this is something that I'm ready to spend like a significant part of my life working on?
Honestly, it was before we even incorporated.
Really?
Yeah.
Can you tell us about it? Like, what was that moment like?
So it was, I called up a friend of mine, and I just wanted to stress test this idea that, hey, you were on, in the trenches with me at CAT. We saw what we had to do to build the simulators. We see, the issues that we had on, the Urban Challenge, right? Like, we're at CMU and we're still largely playing back logs, right? To test if our algorithm is still working. What do you think about this? He's like, oh, no, this is a huge issue. Can you help our company too? And so that's why we started working with Honeywell. And, we realized that they had a huge team of really talented folks, and a huge portion of their time was going into just getting the simulation solution working. We're like, hold on a sec. These are smart, talented folks. We can help them. There's a lot of value here everywhere. And we've just been continuing to find and uncover that. So we benefited from early proof in, anecdotal form of the need for what we were doing. And of course, for both Apurva and I, this is pretty core, right? He cares about better products, safer products. I care very much about this from a robotics and AI perspective. There's a better way to build things. And so it's the grouchy engineer, 20 some odd years.
You guys had that match on mission, and then you had the validation from, this is an interesting thing. It's like you had a network because of your work experience and your education, the people you worked around. You were able to tap into that network to validate your idea. How important was it, to actually have a network to help you get to that moment of aha?
Oh, huge. I mean, I would imagine this applies in a lot of industries, but when you look in the main industries that we help, it is very cliquish. Part of it's because everybody's like me. We're introverted engineers. We know and love the people they work with, but we don't have 1,000 Facebook friends that we're constantly chatting with. So that network is really important because it's proof to your secondary contacts, right? They know someone who knows someone who knows you, and so on and so forth. Being able to get the time from someone to sit down and really understand, is this a problem for you? That's hard to pull off from a cold call perspective if you're a wet behind the ears entrepreneur. Like, we know how to do that now, but we didn't back then. And so being able to ping our network was highly valuable.
And so is that one of the things you recommend to entrepreneurs as they're thinking about starting something, is they either evaluate their network to see where they stand in it, or to build it, or what advice do you give a young version of yourself who's going to be starting a company at some point?
Oh, well, we don't have time for all of that advice, but from
What's
the
the number
network,
one or two things, with some snapshots?
yeah. Get ready for a lot of hard work and wearing a lot more hats than you thought. But to your main question, I don't think anybody should be scared away if they don't have the network. But I mean, there's certainly like the novel advice here, like write what you know, solve the problems that you know, and look around. And again, even for introverted engineers, you know more people than you think you do. And if you ask someone, hey, can I bend your ear for 30 minutes and just get your thoughts and advice on this problem? Most people are willing to say yes. Most humans really want to help. Take advantage of that. Don't do just a dream. Validate it with people first.
That is a great clip right there. Don't just do a dream. Validate it with people. Well, I have to point out that you are wearing a Superman t-shirt, and you've mentioned that you're an introvert many times. So what's the deal? Are you a Superman introvert? Like, what's going on with that shirt?
This is a lovely shirt that my lovely wife got for me, and I happen to be wearing it. I would love to claim some deeper meaning, but no, it happens to fit. And
I see. So that's not your real, she thinks it's your alter ego, or is that her projection on you?
No, yes, she thinks of me as Superman. I must be.
We'll let her know.
We'll see if she agrees.
It's funny. So well, I just wanted to stay on the network for a second. Was there a person in your career that really just like opened doors for you, or like made a huge impact in you? Is there like one person that you kind of look back on and say, this is the person that put me on the path of this success?
Oh yeah. His name's Keith Lay. He's here in Pittsburgh now with me, which is kind of amazing. Keith was my first program manager at Caterpillar. And I had to make the choice coming out of undergrad, was going to do product design or robotics. I chose robotics because I liked the technical challenge. And working with Keith, I started to hear these stories about this mythical place, Carnegie Mellon. And Keith actually came out here as part of a CAD effort to make the autonomous excavator. And that's still my white whale in my career. That's the one machine I haven't truly automated yet. But I hear all these stories about all these people that I now know. But I heard about when they were young engineers and trying to get this work done. I realized like this is pretty interesting. And so that's
how you'd worked with him at CAT. Is that how you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he was part of your kind of professional network, became personal, and then when he discovered something, he shared it with you, and then introduced you to a whole world that now has affected your life.
Yeah, it's mostly the latter. Just like saying like, hey, you may not know about this, but sit down, let me tell you a few stories about this world that's out there, because now everybody knows what Carnegie Mellon is.
Yes.
But 20 years ago, a smaller group of people knew what it was. Wow. And just helping me understand what was out there and the people that were out there. So as soon as I got the call about CMU, I was off. Right.
So this is a perfect segue for one of the things I've been dying to ask you about is about the future. Right. So you're living in the future. It's the business you're in, right? You're in the robotics business. You're living in the future. You have to live, so I have asked two kind of prediction questions. One is related to the robotics industry. Like what's a trend or something that's happening in robotics that people right now generally don't know about, but they will relatively soon? Something that's kind of more on the edge, that it's about to happen and people are not focusing enough time on it, but it's about to pop. 3 to 5 years, not like tomorrow.
Wow. You asked the hard questions. If I
You're wearing the Superman t-shirt, like
man, so part of the issue is that phrase hardware is hard. Mm-hmm. So when most people think of robotics, they think about a piece of hardware that I can buy and run in my house. Mm-hmm. And I think some people may not fully grok it. But when you look at like the drone behind me, when you look at the Roomba that's running around your house, there's a shocking amount of intelligence there. And, what we're seeing is that, again, like a lot of my teammates have been pushing the autonomous car industry forward. And that is, I think, unquestionably the area that's really been knocking hard on this really challenging door, trying to get it open. But there's a lot of other areas where people are working forward. And what we're starting to see is that folks are coming to market with not fully complex automated systems with $150,000 of sensors on their roofs. but it's things like this drone back here that has tools that essentially fly itself for me. It's tools like, that's the ethos at iRobot. How can we make something simple to get the job done? You're starting to see that in the amount of driver assist that are coming in your cars that you buy today. And that is starting to permeate kind of surprising parts of the world. And we're just going to be able to access more and more of it. The cost of sensors is dropping through the floor. The cost of compute's dropping through the floor. And it's enabling us to make intelligent products in ways that 20 years ago was a pipe dream. And that's just been a really amazing thing to watch as time has moved on.
Is there something in that is it like costs are going down or like compute capacity is going up? Just purely the combination of the two, like what, because it does feel like it's ever closer, but which of these levers is the one that's moving us to that end game?
In my experience at CAT, it's the hardware cost.
Okay.
We are absolutely getting better at the algorithms and the approach and the architecture and how we think about problems. But it doesn't matter how well I think about a problem if my robot vacuum needs a $30,000 LiDAR to work. Right. Look at, I've got a phone next to me with a LiDAR on it that is, terrible if I'm an off-road robot, right, driving at 60 miles an hour through the brush. But for indoor work, it's fantastic. And that's really enabling things that now we have that ROI against that BOM that makes sense now.
Okay.
And that's
so here's a market question for you. So this is like, it could be anything. We kind of, I think you alluded to it a little bit. So what is the robot? Something, it could be the Roomba, it could be your car, it could be a semi truck, a plane. What is the autonomous robot that we are going to first see that affects our daily lives?
Well, if I want to get nerdy, I might argue we already have it.
Ooh, let's do it. What is it?
Like if you just think about voice assistants.
Oh yeah.
Like it depends on, do you argue that that's a robot or not? The only thing it doesn't have it is an actuator, but it's changing things around you for you.
It's true. Turn on the music, turn down the lights, turn up the heat. There's a bunch of interface that's more software oriented.
Yeah. Rosie from the Jetsons could flick that switch for you, or your home automation kit could do it for you. Does it matter that that actuator is not there?
Well, then I guess what we're going to do is we're going to leave it that we're already living in the future.
That is true. 2 minutes ago, this was the future.
Well, Mike, I really appreciate your time. What a great conversation. So much fun. Can't wait to, I'm looking forward to watching your continued success, and it's important work you're doing, and appreciate that you're doing it as a collaboration between Pittsburgh and Silicon Valley, because one thing we all know is it takes everybody and talent from everywhere to solve the biggest problems facing us. So thanks again.
Of course. Thank you. Take care.